This video is going to focus on Holden Caulfield's character and some of the things we learn about it through the book. The main aspect I want to focus on is how he's observant and a sensitive character. And why this is important is because the more he is observant, because he's relating the story to us as readers, the more we get to observe. Because he's sensitive to his environment, the more we are aware of the circumstances going on in the novel. The first quote that I could find that touches on him being observant and sensitive is when he says, "I was trying to feel some kind of goodbye." This is when he's leaving Pensy Prep. Often we're in that circumstance where we're leaving somewhere we've been at for a while, and instead of just rushing off, we want to reflect on things like, who was I when I first came here? And who am I now I'm leaving? What difference did this place make in my life? And this, I think, is what Holden is doing when he's leaving Pensy Prep. We might have thought, because he's left so many schools, that he just doesn't care and he's just waiting to the rush to the next school or the next place. But actually, he does have this sensitive side. J.D. Salinger wants us to know that he's not just an unthinking brute. He was trying to feel some kind of goodbye and reflect on the meaning that Pensy Prep had in his life. The quote, "People never notice anything," from chapter 2, and the number to the right, by the way, is the chapter where the quote comes from. When he says people never notice anything, there's two aspects, I think, to that quote, and that makes it quite an important quote, I think. One is the more obvious thing of, why aren't they noticing his story? Why don't they care more about what's happening to him? People seem happy to go on in their own lives and ignore him, as many of the women ignore his flirtations, and the guys just want to get away from him often. He wants people to notice him more often, as much as he notices them. But also, I think it's deeper than that. He realizes how so many people seem to be going about their lives like it was some kind of movie, expecting it all to be a happy ending and it to be very simple and all of that. And he's saying that people never notice that perhaps they're part of this story. They're like a movie. They believe they're in a movie, and they never notice that life isn't always like a movie. And they're just going along and falling into the same old traps as maybe their parents did in terms of schools, careers. He's going to rebel against that. He's going to notice the stories around him and not just fall into the same traps as everyone else. So it's quite a powerful quote for those two reasons. Linking to that, he says, "I hate the movies like poison," and I think it's for that reason. He doesn't like phoniness of actors or people putting on unnatural voices. He wants at least honesty. He wants to know what actually is going on. That's why he likes when his teacher, Mr. Antolini, gave him honest advice. Even if he didn't always agree with it, he at least sensed that this was a teacher trying to give him honest advice. And he doesn't like anything that resembles movies or acting or phoniness. The other aspect of his character that you get from the second half of the quote is how he often turns this bitterness into mischievousness. He likes imitating them. Getting a bang is like he enjoys imitating and mocking them. So he's not always bitter and depressed about people falling into these traps and going through the same routines of teaching and jobs. He often enjoys mocking all of that. A subtle point that J.D. Salinger uses to show that he's a sensitive character is with Jane Gallagher, when he notices that she wouldn't move any of her kings. She just liked the way they looked when they were all in the back row. In many parts of the book, he comes across as this obsessed, lecherous, that just means like a lustful character. But we see here that he does have a sensitive streak. Even when he's talking to this young woman and he's a young guy, he actually notices this small thing about her character. It shows he does have a caring, perhaps kind side. One thing, by the way, to sum up all of the quotes we've looked at so far, is that the story seems to be, for Holden, quite a cathartic one to talk about. A cathartic telling of the story. Cathartic means you get a rush of emotions and you feel like you've learned something after you do something. So if you scream after getting really annoyed, that can sometimes be cathartic in the sense that it's a rush of emotions that you've let go, and now you feel like you're a bit calmer and you understand what's going on a bit more. You understand your own emotions a bit more. And Holden telling us all these things through these quotes, I think, is a cathartic experience to him. And I bet at the end of the novel, he feels like he understands his own narrative a lot better than he did at the start. Carrying on then, we've got when he says certain things they should stay the way they are. He's talking about when he's in the museum in chapter 16 and how he likes how they just stay the same, but doesn't like how the people around and himself grow older and change. I think it links to how he likes the children being innocent and young like Phoebe and doesn't want them to grow up into a world full of bitterness and full of treachery. He wants them to stay innocent, just like the exhibits in the museum. But obviously that can't happen because they are going to grow up. And it's quite a sad note in the book. But on the other hand, it does show he cares. As the title does, Catcher in the Rye, he wants to catch them and stop them from falling over that cliff, out of innocence and into that, it's almost like out of the Garden of Eden, in that field of rye, and out into the dark, sinful world. He wants things to stay the way they are in this symbolic Garden of Eden. Just the last few points. When he says, I was crazy about The Great Gatsby, I think that's quite an interesting quote you can analyse on quite a deep level. If you've read The Great Gatsby, the main character is quite a mournful guy who in a way, you could interpret it. All of these things are my own interpretations, are not necessarily the right answer. But I think Gatsby, in The Great Gatsby, realizes the futility of the American dream, and that's one of his major characteristics. And in a similar way, Holden sees through the stories that other people are telling themselves, and in that sense sees through the American dream. And it's just an interesting point. You can discuss it and talk about it from a different angle, but it's an interesting observation that he was crazy about The Great Gatsby. In a similar vein, he says, anyway, I'm sort of glad they got the atomic bomb invented. If there's ever another war, I'm going to sit right the hell on top of it. Not only is he seeming to mock the whole military establishment, and remember this book was written in the late 40s, early 50s, with just after the Second World War and just before or during the Korean War. And he's tired of that narrative of war, of the brave soldier going out there. He doesn't want that anymore. He's tired of war itself. And he mocks it by saying, with the atomic bomb, I would just sit on top of it. Not only is he saying, unlike some knight riding a horse, he's going to ride an atomic bomb, in the sense that that would obviously blow himself up and lots of other people. Perhaps you could say that shows his misanthropic side. Misanthropic, as the picture you might gather, misanthropic means someone who's not particularly keen on other human beings and human societies. But it's actually a criticism of himself, because obviously that would blow himself up. So it's like, I'm tired of all that. I'm tired of war. I would just jump on top of the bomb like this guy and have it all be over as quick as possible. Our last 2 points. It's an interesting theme that the one subject that Holden seems to be good at is English. And what is English about? And in this case, mostly literature. It's about understanding people's stories. And he tends to fail, it said, about oral examinations. So he's not so good about telling his story, although of course as readers we realise he has a compelling story. It's more focusing on other people's stories that he's good at, observing and perhaps judging their stories. That's the subject he gets flying marks in. Finally, he says at the end, I sort of miss everybody I told about. And it shows that he valued that storytelling experience. As I said before, it was cathartic to him. It's not something you can just, a story you can just say and not have any emotions about. It's made a big difference to him, not only the events in the novel, but the very fact he's now told people about it. it's now changed how he views his life.